Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to my monthly journal pages. Today we'll be flipping through my May pages and chatting about the journal spreads, techniques, and ephemera I created to connect with my personal tarot practice last month. So for the last few months, I've been working in my little disc-bound journal that I've created for all of my spring readings, all of my work that I've done over the last 3 months. So I have my March readings in here, I have my April readings in here, and I have videos on both of those on my channel as well. And then we have my May pages, and these are the ones that we'll be taking a look at today. So for May, I kind of went with a little bit of a home theme to start off with, and then you'll see as we move along that I didn't really stick with any sort of theme this last month. I kind of bounced around and I kind of let the decks themselves dictate what my pages would look like. I did use some book pages to create this little intro page. Again, book pages and just some scrapbooking. This is also another book page that I used in here, and these two are from the Katie Daisy book that I've shown before on my channel. Here's my list of the decks that I worked with in May. Now these aren't my only decks that I worked with throughout the month, but they're just the decks that I worked with. They were my weekly decks, the ones I used for my weekly readings. So speaking of the other decks that I use, I also use the Ember and Aura deck and the Goddess Oracle for my Self-Care Sunday readings. And this was the reading that I did on the first Sunday of May, which was the 3rd. So I have just a picture here. I have a little snippet from the guidebook for the Goddess Oracle, and that's what I wrote here just so that I could remember that. And then on the back, I actually have my reading and then my overall message. On Sunday evenings, I also do an Archangel message, and I pull a card from the Archangel Gabriel deck and the Influence of the Angels Tarot, and that provides my message. Sometimes I just do them on these little sort of clip cards because they're not huge readings. They're just a message for me to tap into and to remember throughout the upcoming week. So I have my message on the back. Then moving into the first week of May, I was still working with the Spacious Tarot, so I have my reading here. And I didn't do my traditional 3-card reading that I've been doing lately. I did a more expanded reading, and I have all of that. This is the reading that I call my Inner Balance reading. I do have this reading available. I think it's a free download in my shop. And I have my little reading here, so you can see there's my cards. I put a list of my reading here, and this particular reading, because it was quite large, actually goes over a couple of different pages. So here's my cards and my reflections. And then we move into the next week where, again, I did my Self-Care Sunday reading here. And again, these aren't super lengthy readings most of the time. They're kind of quick messages. I do keep the Goddess Oracle card out all week long so that I can reconnect with it throughout the week. And same with the Archangel reading that I do on Sunday evenings, and I keep the Archangel Gabriel card out throughout the week as well, so I can tap into that. Now moving into the second week of May, I was working with the Muse Tarot, and I found, as I mentioned in my monthly reflection video, that the Muse Tarot really doesn't work as a tarot deck for me. But what I did find that it works really well for is a sort of springboard into creativity or a gateway into kind of unleashing your own creative energy. And so that was how I ended up using it throughout that week. I didn't end up doing traditional readings because I found that they just really didn't work very well for me. But when I approached it not as a tarot, but more, I guess more in an oracle sense, really, that worked rather well. And I used it for tapping into some creative energy. And again, here's another card that I just tapped into that creative energy with. And that's something that I'll actually speak about in another video, talk about that more at length because a couple people have asked. So I just did a few readings that week. Then I move into the, then I have my little Sunday reading again that I did using the Ember and Aura and the Goddess Oracle. And you can see I was kind of using these smaller cutouts for these little smaller sheets for my Sunday readings, because I do 2 readings on Sunday, one in the morning and one in the evening, but they're not super long readings, so I don't need like a ton of space to really journal about them, because they are readings that I kind of go back to and think about throughout the week. I don't necessarily journal more about them, but I definitely return to them to tap back into that message and that energy. And that's one of the reasons why I put it in my journal, so that I can do that. So here's my Sunday readings, and we have my Archangel one. And this one I did like a ton of paper crafting on here. There's like 5 or 6 different layers of things on this one. I was just playing with it and having fun. So moving into the next week, we have the page that we did together on my Tarot Journal with Me series. And this is what I call a patchwork page. And we basically made a page out of all these different scraps of papers, and we chose papers that fit the particular color scheme of the cards that I was working with, or my reading from that Monday, because I had pulled my reading ahead of time and then we put it into my journal together. So I have my little reading here. I have the cards. We made this little tag and I just put this little string on it just for some decorative elements. And then you can see on the back here, I included my reading for Wednesday, which was a check-in reading that I did, just a 3 card, and I have my little reflections there. And then on Friday, we have my kind of wrap up for the week reading that I did, and I used the Forager's Daughter Tarot, and then I also incorporated the Spirit Animal Oracle, because I was working with that for my wellness practice, and I thought those 2 decks would just work really well together, and I think that they read beautifully together, so I just kind of noted my reflections there. So that was kind of my wrap up. So I had kind of my reading to get me started for the week, things that I wanted to keep in mind. And then I had a reading where I checked in with things on Wednesday, so kind of like a midweek check-in type of a reading. This wasn't necessarily like a waterfall reading because I didn't re-pull the cards out. I didn't keep it going. These are 3 separate readings of a kind of, here's where I'm starting, what I need to know for the week, here's where I'm at, and what I need to know moving forward for the rest of the week. And then kind of my wrap-up on Friday is, okay, here's looking back at what has happened this week and where I'm at and where I'm going and what I need to know moving forward. So that's kind of how I approach those when I do 3 card readings multiple times throughout a week. Kind of do it as a start of the week, a check-in, and then a wrap-up for the week. And I like 3 cards because it gives me, it just provides more context, more substance to work with. Although I think a single card draw works just as well, and I have done that many, many times as well. So on this page here, I actually went back, and this was actually the Saturday following that, where I actually went back through all 3 readings and I did some reflections, and I covered it up because it's actually quite personal information. But underneath here is my reflections on not only my cards that I drew all throughout the week, but also just my kind of reflections on the week as a whole, and how I think things went and how I connected with my cards and things of that nature. So moving into the last week of the month and the last entry that I have in this little journal here, we have my card pull from that Monday using the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot. And for this one, I did a 3 card pull, and I just noted simple keywords. And it was kind of like this, not really keywords, simple phrases. So I kind of just looked at it like a little treasure map. That was kind of how I was approaching it. Here's the start, here's where I need to go, and here's where I want to end up. And it was just kind of a fun way to approach a reading. So we have the 9 of Swords is confront your fears here, and then Death is embrace the changes. So we need to confront our fears, we need to embrace those changes. And for the 2 of Cups, where we want to end up is bringing it all into balance. So I just thought that was a fun way to kind of approach the reading. Again, I can go back and I can add more deeper insights and reflections to that. It was just actually a really busy week, and I just didn't have time to, and that's okay too, because I can still look back at this. I have my cards in here so I can see the actual artwork on the cards, because I think that's important. And one of the reasons why I always include a printout of the cards that I pulled is because the artwork for me really does play into the messages that I receive. It really plays into those intuitive hits, and it really plays into how I interpret the cards. This 9 of Swords is different than the 9 of Swords in, say, the Victorian Romantic Tarot. So even though they're the same card, they do have the same base meaning for me, the artwork does influence the way that I interpret the cards, as well as the context and a great deal of other things that go into a reading. But the reason that I'm pretty adamant about putting my cards in there is because that part of the process is very important to me. So I can come back here and I can look at this image in particular. You know, not just any Nine of Swords, this particular Nine of Swords. And I can tap into what that meant for me for this week and how I used that energy or tapped into that energy to confront my fears. So I think in this case, like, this just shows that you don't have to do like a ton of journaling. You can make your journal really streamlined and you can get just the key points in, and that can be enough to really tap you back into and bring you back to the reading, which is really what the journal is all about, right? To put it in there, to be able to get it out in the first place, to get the reading down, to put it into a place where you can come back later and look at it and you can reflect on it. That doesn't mean that you have to do mass amounts of writing to reflect on it. You can just sit here and look at the cards and think about them. And I think that works just as well. Or you can do like I have done here, where I basically journaled an entire page about my week. I think both methods work really well, and I do both in my journal. It just depends on how I'm feeling and what I have going on for that week. So that's my long-winded ramble about why these two pages are set up the way they are and how I approached each of those readings. And then Friday, the last reading that I did, in this particular journal, I again used my Mermaid tarot, and I have my reading is actually underneath this little flap, because this was a little bit, for me, a little bit more of a personal reading. Anytime the Queen of Pentacles comes up, that's kind of like my personal significator card. So anytime she shows up in a reading, it usually tends to be a highly personal reading for me. Although I do have to say, like, pretty much all my readings are personal, because I read tarot primarily for personal growth and self-development. So they're all personal in that respect, but sometimes some of them they hit a little closer to home than others. So sometimes I just kind of put that in there, as it's, for one, it allows me to, when I'm filming my videos, to not show super private information, but it also is a signal to me when I'm flipping through my journal that anything that I have hidden like this, anything that I've tucked in a pocket, put behind a flap, or anything of that nature, that tells me that there's something deeply personal about that reading, or there was at the time. And so sometimes it's really interesting to go back to those particular readings where I have physically hidden the reading, where I have taken the essence of the reading or my personal reflections, and I've hidden them in some way. To me, that means that that's a deeply personal reading, and those are the ones that I tend to definitely try to return to look back at them and see, why did I hide that in the first place? Yes, it is a little bit to hide personal things, because I film my journals. I'm very open with my journaling practice. If you really wanted to, you could pause on any point in my journal and actually read what I wrote in it. So in the instances where I have things that I'm just really not okay with that being shared on a public platform, sure, I put them, behind little flaps or in envelopes or things of that nature, or I do stuff like this and I just hide it. That totally works too. That also tells me that there was something deeply meaningful about that particular reading. And so it's a visual cue as I'm flipping back through my journal that this one, there was something really personal in that. And so I like to come back to those. So it's just a visual cue for me as well, because I think even if you create a journal that you never show on to anyone else, much less, on YouTube like I do, but if you never show it to anyone else, you can still incorporate those things into your journal, because they will allow you to remember that there was something highly personal about that. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but for me, sometimes when I do a reading, it's kind of a surface reading, because there's not a whole lot going on underneath that, right? It's more of a reading of, here's what you need to know for this week. Here's how you can be the best you this week. Go ahead, tap into that, and let's move on. Those readings are great too. But occasionally, you get readings that, like I said, they just hit really close to home. And for those ones, when that happens, doing things visually in my journal that remind me of that just allows me to come back to that and go, oh yeah, this journal or this particular entry, this reading hit really close to home. So I should probably check back in with it to see how I'm feeling about it. Does it still resonate with me? have things changed or progressed? And sometimes I do some additional journaling about that as well. Overall, I think that I'm quite happy with the way my May journal came out. I started to realize like all these little cutouts and things like this, while they look really cool, they kind of get a little bit hard to flip through when you get too many of them stacked up. I love the torn page. I think this is my favorite page from the month. But you can see here, like I have a small one here, I sort of torn half of one here, a small one here, and I have this big bulky one here. So sometimes it gets to be a little much, but I always have fun doing them. So that's, you know, it's good. It's good when it's fun. I think that this really helps to tap into my tarot practice in a really creative way as well. So like I said, in March, April, and May, we've been working in this, or I've been working in my little disc bound happy planner, punching out those pages, creating them all myself. And that's been really fun, and I've really enjoyed it. Like I said, I particularly enjoy the ability to, you know, pull a page out. It's stick. To pull a page out, you know, do my crafting, do my write-ups, do whatever I need to do with it, and then when it's done, put it back in. And that has been really handy, and it's definitely a system that I really enjoy working with and will probably do again. However, having said all of that, I'm going to do something a little bit different in June. I know I don't usually show what I'm going to be working on in the next month, but I thought since it's sitting here, I'm going to, and because I'm doing something a little bit differently. So at the end of 2019, I got my first real traveler's notebook. This is a Chic Sparrow. This is the Mr. Darcy, and I've wanted one of these for a really long time. So I finally got that. I used it in January and February. I have a couple videos on putting it together as well. And then I kind of fell in love with this little system here and wanted to try that for my tarot journaling because I was using it for a lot of my other journaling and planning. So I wanted to give it a try here to see how it worked. However, for June, I'm going to be moving back into this. Let's just move this out of the way. Because I'm going to be doing something a little bit different with my daily tarot practice. I'm going to be working primarily with the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot, and I really want to focus in on one deck. I think that maybe I'll do a challenge this month and you really use that to tap into it. I kind of just want to, even though I have a lot of new decks and I really want to explore them all, I'm kind of feeling the need to just kind of sink into one deck for a little while. I do use other decks throughout the month for other various things. I will still pull other decks out for readings, particularly if I have specific readings I want to do. But in terms of like my daily tarot practice or my weekly readings that I do, I think I really want to focus in on just one deck and just kind of slow things down. I think that's really where I'm at, just in my tarot practice overall. In the month of June, I want to slow down. And it's not just, I'm not just talking about in my purchases, although as I talked about in my depthier video and in my monthly reflections, that, you know, that kind of went a little haywire for a while, and that's okay. I don't have any regrets about any of the decks that I purchased. However, I am feeling like I need to just take a breath. I need to slow down and I want to focus in. So I'm going to go ahead and focus in on the Mermaid Tarot primarily. Like I said, I will still be using other decks here and there, but this is the deck I'm going to primarily work with in June. And so going back to my Traveler's Notebook, I created an insert for it. And this is a completely handmade insert. If you want to see how I actually created this, I did do a little 3-part mini series of putting this together on my other channel, and that's Boho Bloom. I'll leave a link in the description box below so you can check that out. But this is what I'm going to be using for my tarot journal for the month of June, and it will be primarily using my Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot. So that's my plan moving forward. Again, if you want to see how I created this, you can check out my other channel. But I'm really looking forward to diving into it, to settling, kind of just taking a breath, slowing down a little bit. I do love all the crafting that I do. I love creating all of these fun pages, and I think that that's a really wonderful way to explore my practice, and I do intend to still do a lot of that in this particular insert. We're going to be doing some challenging things like trying to sew on an insert that's already bound. So we'll probably do that in a tarot journal with me. But at the same time, I'm also trying to do my deck study of my Ophidia Rosa, and I find that the more I do this kind of stuff and the more I do work with a lot of different decks, it kind of takes me away from it. So I kind of want to just focus in on that. I'm going to be working primarily with the Mermaid Tarot, and then I'm going to be focusing more on my study of the Ophidia Rosa. So that's kind of my plan moving forward. I don't know why I went into all of that, but that is what it is. Thank you for joining me for this flip through my tarot journal pages. If you'd like to find out more about any of the decks that I used this last month, check out my monthly reflections video, which you will find linked in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this flip through and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.